doing? Does anyone want to take our psych experiment?
Every day, color affects how we think, feel, and interpret the actions of those around us. For years, interior decorators, clothing designers, artists, and psychologists have utilized color to elicit emotion in consumers and patients alike. Color, however, can signify different meanings in different cultures. For example, white in Western cultures demonstrates innocence and purity, whereas in some Eastern cultures, white signifies mourning. Although some colors are culture-specific, other colors, such as red, evoke physical responses regardless of culture. For example, red has been found to raise pulse rates, and in Dr. Andrew Elliott's study, red and yellow were associated with anxiety more than blue and green were. Other studies indicate that cool-colored placebo pills, green and blue, were less effective than warm-colored placebo pills, yellow and red, possibly due to the physical responses humans feel while looking at yellow and red.
While black is commonly known to represent dominance, in a historical study analyzing the penalties teams received at various tournaments, teams wearing black or mostly black were found to have received more penalties than teams in other colors. Other teams also reported having more negative feelings towards teams wearing black.
Blue is generally a pacifying color which could stem from an evolutionary survival tactic in which humans and animals know that with a blue sky and bright light from the sun, it is unlikely for there to be rain or thunderstorms, which could destroy habitat, food, and ultimately elicit fear. A blue sky represents good circumstances for hunting, gathering food, and building shelter.
In people's homes, I use a lot of blues for people who want cooler spaces, because that tends to be a really tranquil color. I had a client that specifically requested orange in a home gym because that's also a color that like promotes activity. I had one client who loved purple and wanted purple everywhere. To her, it felt like really comfortable. It's a really spiritual color, and it's been known to be like a color of royalty. But for her, that felt really good. Red is a color that I generally don't use very much, but if in residential design, sometimes you'll see it in dining rooms, and specifically in restaurant design, red is used a lot because it's said to stimulate your appetite. But you'll notice like McDonald's colors, the red and yellow, the two together make you want to eat more. People's perception of color is subjective, and I think there are general guidelines like red and orange tend to be invigorating, blue tends to be soothing. In our culture, black is seen as kind of daunting, and white is the color of purity. But in other cultures, it's the opposite. White can be representative of death.
Dr. Andrew Elliott of Rochester University, one of our professional experts, conducted an experiment testing the effects of color on achievement attainment. In the experiments, he and his team carried out tests that were designed to measure physiological responses. The results of one of the experiments indicate that there is more prefrontal activity in the brain while looking at the color red than while looking at green or blue. Dr. Elliott also found that red and yellow are disagreeable to an individual's focus. This prefrontal activity could explain why individuals are unable to focus. They are bombarded with activity which promotes anxiety and stress. In another experiment conducted by Dr. Elliott's team, participants chose easier tasks to complete after being exposed to the color red. After conversing with Dr. Elliott, we learned this phenomenon could be due to the anxiety-inducing effects of red. The more anxious an individual feels, the less likely they are to take on a difficult task. In order to test the effects of color on emotions, we created an experiment in which participants would be shown a slideshow of the same picture of a man wearing different colored shirts. We paired red and green together as well as blue and yellow, asking in which picture does the man look the most anxious. Then we paired black and white as well as orange and purple together, asking in which picture does the man look the most optimistic. The participants had 1 second to look at each of the pictures and then record their answers.
Upon researching this information about color and its effects on our emotions, we hypothesized that out of the color combinations we decided to use, red and yellow would make the man in the picture seem most anxious, and orange and white would make the man seem most optimistic. We paired the anxiety-inducing colors with green and blue, which signify calmness and serenity. Likewise, we paired the optimistic colors, white and orange, with black, a color that evokes tension and dominance, and purple, a color that evokes peace and introspection.
Our objective was to find a clear-cut answer. Does a certain color make a person feel a certain mood? Our results show this. When we asked participants in which photo the man looked more anxious, 25 participants chose the picture of the man in the red shirt, and 19 participants chose the picture of the man in the green shirt. For the second question, in which photo does the man look more optimistic, 14 participants preferred the picture of the man in the black shirt, and 30 participants preferred the photo of the man in the white shirt. In question 3, we asked again in which photo does the man look more anxious, and 18 participants chose blue, while 26 chose yellow. Lastly, after asking whether our participants perceived the man in the orange shirt or the purple shirt as more optimistic, 27 participants chose orange and 17 participants chose purple.
To recap, red and green showed no clear preference. Over double the participants chose white as opposed to black. Participants slightly preferred yellow to blue, and the same with orange to purple. In all of our tests, the colors we predicted were chosen most often by the participants, but after conducting statistical analysis, we have concluded that our results are not statistically significant. The degree to which our predictions have succeeded are too small to have serious meaning. At the very least, we can conclude that red and yellow have slightly stronger correlation to the feeling of anxiety than blue and green, and orange has slightly stronger correlation to the feeling of optimism than purple. White, on the other hand, was the only color with data that was strong enough to support our hypothesis. We must conclude that in the case of our study, the color of the man's t-shirt does not have a clear effect on the participants' perception of mood.
For many experiments, there exist at least a few confounding variables that the experimenters cannot easily control. In our experiment, we found a few possible variables that may have contributed to the mixed results we received while testing. Our participants may have already been in a certain mood prior to taking our experiment, so their cognitive processes may have already been primed into reacting a certain way to the colors. Another variable may be a color preference that subconsciously guides the participant to choosing their favorite color regardless of the question. Our participants may have also noticed that the man's shirt color was simply changing and not his actual facial expression, and participants who have taken psychology before proved more likely to be less compliant while completing the task in an attempt to figure out what we were doing with our project.
One reason for our unexpected results is because people may perceive colors differently. The cognitive perspective addresses this.
Since all the hardware of the human eye is the same, and it's all based on specific wavelengths and colors of light, that we would all see things the same way within a small margin of error. But here's the thing. The number of cones in people's eyes vary hugely, and the kinds of cones aren't evenly distributed, which means that the brain is more instrumental in actually decoding color. It steps in, analyzes the information, and helps us sort everything out. And that introduces a lot of doubt.
Behavioral psychologists may argue that color affects our mood simply because we have attributed that color to a certain emotion in a prior experience. Connecting this to our experiment, we can attribute the differences in our results from our hypothesis to the fact that people have been conditioned to respond to certain colors based on their personal experiences. One participant may have already formed an association between a color and a feeling. For example, if a participant's baby blanket was red, the participant may not choose red as the more anxious color. Because of this, color psychology is hard to generalize.
Alexander Schaus, director of the American Institute for Biosocial Research, said color had a direct physiological impact. The electromagnetic energy of color, he said, interacts in some still unknown way with the pituitary and pineal glands and the hypothalamus, deep in the brain. These organs regulate the endocrine system, which controls many basic body functions and emotional responses, such as aggression.
So if you want to get pumped up, you should be seeing red. Want to calm down? Surround yourself with hues of blue and green. And if you want to put yourself and others in a good mood, try changing the color of your shirt.